Thank you everybody for joining us. Today we are happy to have Sarah with us. Sarah is a real estate investor and she just retired at the beginning of October. Thank you, Sarah, for joining us and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to be on the show. I'm excited.
Thank you. So Sarah, can you tell us about your journey and a little bit about you for people who don't know you?
Yeah, sure. I started investing in real estate in 2013. 7 years later, I decided to leave the 9-to-5 and retire from the corporate world. And that was just this past October. But prior to that, I mean, I wasn't born in a family of investors and contractors or any of that. It was just literally going to the bank one day and realizing that I had been working and accumulated no assets, just liabilities. And originally I didn't even know what those things meant. And it was a good wake-up call to start doing some research. And like literally the research was Googling how to become rich and wealthy and retire early. That was what I was Googling. And it wasn't even necessarily real estate to begin with, but I was just like, I need to figure out how people do it. And real estate kept coming back up and up and up with examples. And so did, buying stocks and paper assets and that kind of stuff and starting a business. I'm like, those are the three things that I could Google where I could see the people becoming wealthy and retiring early from those things. And so I just decided that real estate was the best option for me because I do like some control, and stocks, paper assets, I don't find that is as controllable as brick and mortar real estate. And starting a business, well, I mean, that felt like a whole other job. So it was kind of, not the thing that I wanted to replace my job with, essentially another job. And I mean, obviously, being a landlord and that kind of stuff, it is a business, but it's not a business where you're putting in, full hour days. And so I started listening to some podcasts and reading some books and, decided that we might as well just dig in and figure out, the first thing that we could buy. And the first thing that we can buy, we made lots of mistakes on, is literally the cheapest thing I could find. And I ended up working a couple jobs to just have enough for the down payment, cashing out some vacation so that I could have a little bit of extra, cash there as well. And so me, my boyfriend, we've been together for 14 years. So he wasn't so much into, the idea of real estate in the beginning because he didn't want to have the issues with the tenants and people not paying rent, et cetera. So we actually started our first one with his sister, and she was our first tenant, and we knew nothing, but we learned it all from there.
So how is it to rent to a family?
Don't do it. Without going into too much detail, because I don't know where this goes, but yeah. Out of all the tenants, sometimes the people that you're closer to are the ones that will need extra time to pay. And we just, it just wasn't the right fit. So they ended up leaving. And believe it or not, we renovated it a little bit for them before they moved in. And when they left in such horrible shape, we had to re-renovate it again. So, I'm not saying all families or friends are going to be like that, but in our situation, it just didn't work out, which is fine. Like we're civil. But just, it wasn't the right move in the beginning.
Yeah. But I keep hearing people saying, don't rent to your friends and family. Yeah. Many people keep saying that.
Yeah.
Because even if they do anything wrong, you don't want to get mad to them, because even if you get mad, they don't take it in a good way. So
yeah,
it's not like somebody you don't know.
I think the problem too is because it's family and friends, they almost sometimes feel like you owe them because you're the one that they see as the rich uncle or the rich brother or this and that, right? Like even if it was like the one house we owned and they weren't able to own, mm-hmm. Even at one, we were seen as the wealthy ones. And so I think sometimes the respect just isn't fully there. And it's more of well, we're family, you should help me. You should do this for me kind of thing, right?
Unfortunately. But what triggered you to go look for information about getting wealthy? What happened?
Information about what?
Getting wealthy. becoming wealthy and
Oh.
rich?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it is, but I've always wanted to enjoy my one life and not be stuck doing something. Even from a young age, I just didn't really know what it was back then, but I always enjoyed having control of my own life.
Yeah. And
Um,
why did you choose real estate?
Real estate just seemed like the surest way in my mind of not having to wait for 35 years and work for 35 years. So when you start researching, you realize that a lot of people that are buying real estate, well, maybe they're doing it for 5, for 10, for 15 years, and likely they're going to be done. So I think that was the one thing that made me think this is like wealth building, not a get rich quick thing, but it's wealth building in a reasonable amount of time. So originally I thought, okay, 10 to 15 years, I can probably build enough to be done. And so that's, really how it got started. And I'll tell you that, the more that you're into it, the more time you're into real estate, the more it makes sense. Like it starts off really slow and you're like, how is this going to make me retired? But it snowballs. The cash flow, the mortgage pay down, the appreciation, that stuff snowballs. And then you realize that over 1 year, year one, it won't propel you as far as 1 year from year 9 to 10 or year 6 to 7 or whatever that is, right? Like, because it essentially is a good curve. But why real estate? I mean, ultimately, it was just those 3 options were the only 3 I can think of that I researched that made sense. And I'm like, I don't like stocks because, again, I didn't understand it as much, and I didn't understand how that was going to help me retire soon. That like there was too much of a long ways out for me to comprehend that piece. And then the whole business piece, I mean, again, that's just a lot of time. So I'm like, out of those 3 options that a lot of people retire early for, I'm just going to go do real estate. It makes sense.
Do you still own your first property?
Yeah, I do. And so I bought that for $129,000 in Brantford. It's worth about, I mean, it's a really small place. Like literally, it's like 400 or 500 square feet. It was built in the 1850s, but it's probably worth around, I would have to say, 350-ish right now.
Wow.
However, I mean, at some point, I will probably tear it down and rebuild something new. But we have an amazing tenant there now, paying 14. I think he's at $14.95 or $14.75. I can't remember off the top of my head. $14.75 a month. Which that property was bought as at $129,000. I mean, the cash flow on that is pretty good.
Perfect. Oh, somebody just asked a question. Do you see the chat?
Yep. How many properties? I have 14 doors, over 10 properties. 6 of those doors are short-term rentals.
Wow. In the same city?
The short-term?
Mm-hmm.
The short-term, well, one's the cottage in Lakefield. That generates, high season $600 a night, low season $200 to $250. So like that brings in some good cash flow. I've got 2 units in Burlington, bringing in anywhere between $130 to $150 a night each, and then 3 in Hamilton, similar numbers, and then the rest are long-term. But it's really that combination of short-term to boost up the cash flow, and also the tenant turning over. Like the tenant turnovers are really good. Like especially in markets like Ontario, we don't want tenants to be there for too long. I would say 3 years is a good number, because market rents might go up, even 10% in some markets year over year. But you can really only increase it by whatever the government gives you, right? So really, ultimately, as of next year, it's actually nothing. But when your tenants leave, and if they were paying, let's just say they were paying $1,300, well, 5 years later, that new rent, market rent, could be almost $2,000 because of the demand in the area. So you do want them to turn over so that you can boost up the cash flow again.
Keep asking for question. Do you see?
What kind of real estate properties do you buy? They're either singles, conversions, like bungalows that I turn into 2 units, conversions like a single to 3 units, or just single family if they make sense. So I would say any of those. So either single family or multifamily. I don't personally like condos, and I don't touch condos. That's just my personal preference. I don't love the fundamentals that go around it with the lack of control, condo boards being able to increase how they want the maintenance fees or do special assessments or control if you're doing short-term or long-term. Like, I don't like any of that stuff. This is why I don't invest in Toronto. I mean, for many reasons too, but, and then condos, again, usually the cash flow is minimal, unless you're going like, you know, at this point, if you're buying, like maybe if you bought a condo 10 years ago, your cash flow might be okay. I don't know, but usually it's lower cash flow.
Yeah, I have condos too.
Mm-hmm.
So one, the property management is the worst one. Is the worst property management. They keep increasing without any reason. They add $40 a month
Mm-hmm.
without any reason. But the other one is really, and they don't even do anything. The other one is really good and it has a really good cash flow, but the other one, oh, it's really bad. I want to sell it.
Yeah.
And
no.
the other thing, as you say, I wanted to do Airbnb, but I cannot.
Yeah. Because they control everything you can and cannot do. So yeah, so I like the BRRRR strategy really, and I know Pavan, you were asking. So I essentially buy, fix, and rent. Yeah, that's exactly what I do. It's the BRRRR strategy. So buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and repeat. So and it's also a way to scale, right? Because if you're just buying and holding and just putting that down payment and not doing anything, you know, in terms of refinancing and reutilizing that money, that's dead money, and you're going to be capped and stopped really quickly, right? So if you're looking to scale, you need to find ways to unlock that money that you put into that house, you know, within a reasonable amount of time so that you can reuse that money to go into the next deal. So if you're forcing up appreciation with renovations, that's usually the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Or buy like way under market, which is hard to do now, right?
Yeah. So what tips can you give to someone who is just starting up? But new.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the big thing is pick a strategy first. You know, whatever the strategy is that's comfortable to you based on your education and your experience and your time that you want to be spending, you know, week to week on the projects. How much cash you have available, how much financing. So pick a strategy because there's so many things. And sometimes, like, you know, you'll hear people do really well with rent to own. You'll hear people do really well with a BRRRR strategy, with wholesaling. You know, like whatever that is, just pick one and stick to it. You don't want to be doing a bunch of different things and you'll never really grasp it and be able to do it, you know, in and out very efficiently. So once you pick your strategy, then you're going to pick a market, you know, based on fundamentals. Pick a market, learn the market inside and out, or pick two markets if you want to do two, but just don't go all over the place. It's just going to be a lot easier to build your team, which is the next piece. You want to build your team to be able to help you. And if you are in an area, well, at least you can reuse some of the plumbers, the contractors, the HVAC people. And then you've, you know, a lot of the time you could easily just self-manage a small portfolio on your own without having to pay a property manager, at least, you know, for the beginning part of it, or forever if you don't mind tenants. But yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah. If you have any question, feel free to ask. So according to your experience, what is one or few mistakes should a newbie avoid?
Trying to do everything by yourself. You know, definitely, you know, don't reinvent the wheel. Likely somebody has done what you're looking to do. Try to lean on them or their team. You know, work with a mortgage broker. That's a huge one. Don't try to go to the bank because at some point, I mean, if you just want to buy one or two or three properties, go wherever. But if you are actually looking at scaling and retiring and, you know, making things happen, you do need a good mortgage broker on your team, or you will get stopped at like a couple properties. And that's what originally happened to us. We went directly to one of the big banks, and because that's where we had our checking account and stuff like that. But they were okay for our first rental, and then the second one they wanted like 25% down, and then the third they were trying to ask for like 30 or 35 down. And then we met our mortgage broker at that point. And she's like, well, that's just because it's not an investor friendly bank. I'm like, oh, and then, you know, it's just so much easier to work with somebody that works for you. The banks don't work for you. They work for themselves. They're going to try to sell you like mortgage insurance, which is the dumbest thing I've ever been heard of. But, you know, food for another day or discussion for another day, unless you guys want to know about why I hate mortgage insurance. But, you know, that's the number one. Number two, you know, real estate investors, work with them. Work with the ones that have worked with investors that understand the strategy that you're doing. So if I'm doing the BRRRR strategy, I'm not going to be working with an investor that doesn't understand it, because they're not going to be able to run the numbers and help me run the numbers, especially as a newbie. You know, it doesn't matter as much now when you've got the experience, but especially starting out, like, you do want them to tell you this is not a good deal. Your money is going to be stuck in there. You're not going to be able to pull it out. You can get a good coach. You can get a good mentor to help you with that kind of stuff as well. But just working on building that team. You know, originally those were a couple of our mistakes. We used a different realtor than we should have. Didn't go to the mortgage broker. We didn't, you know, lean on somebody to help us build a team. So lots of mistakes there. But over time, you kind of figure it out. You build your processes and that kind of stuff. And then for the BRRRR strategy, I mean, I see so many people just overpay for renos and over renovate. You know, you're renovating to rent. And in many of these markets, you know, it might be to rent to blue collar families that don't really expect luxury. So don't put luxury in properties where you'll not, you know, you'll never see that money be able to be pulled out ever. So just renovate for the area to get the maximum after repair value, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. So talking about the mistake on my first property, so I thought I would be saving money, and I painted the house by myself. It took me months.
Oh gosh.
At some point, I get tired, so I really didn't save any money, but I wasted my time.
Yeah, and you knew that you never wanted to paint probably ever again.
Because I thought, I can't do that. Why am I going to pay somebody? After painting like 3-bedroom and hallway, I said, oh my God, I'm tired.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to do everything. And finally, I hired somebody to finish
good.
it. And he did it one day. After
awesome.
I spent 2 months.
And that costs money, right? If you're holding that mortgage with no renter,
yeah,
you're paying utilities, you're paying the taxes for that, you know, the time that you're holding it, all that stuff. So, and there's nothing covering it. But, you know, I think that's the thing is even if you are handy, like I'm not handy, and that's probably a good thing. You know, and I never, like, even painting that, I wouldn't even know where to start. So just that, I'm like, okay, I just need to hire somebody, and you just need to know roughly how much the stuff costs, and, you know, build the team, trust the team, and fire quickly if they suck, and, you know, hire the right ones by leaning on other people's teams until you've really built your own. But yeah, I mean, the painting thing, here's the thing with painting. I mean, if you want to save money, sometimes like contractors will quote you like $7,000 to paint, and you can probably do it in like a lot cheaper. But if you're gonna take a long time to do it, don't do it. Don't do it, because that's probably gonna cost you like $5,000 of just like mortgage holding over 2 months. You know.
Yeah. Okay. There are a few more questions now on the chat.
Yeah, all right. Can you please give examples of strategies you just referred to? So originally, when I started investing in real estate, I thought there was like just 2 ways that you can do real estate, right? Flipping, which is like HGTV stuff. Like, that's all BS. People, like, that doesn't happen the same way. Or be a landlord, which is what you hear on the news about, like these big bad landlords. So originally that's what I thought there was, right? Be a landlord, buy and hold, buy a property, put a tenant in, you know, collect rent, and then flipping. But there's so many other strategies. So, I mean, if you are getting started, you don't have a whole lot of money, but you have a lot of time and you're a hustler, you can try wholesaling, which is essentially direct marketing to sellers and trying to get deals under contract. And you're going to take that contract and you're going to sell that at a premium from what you bought it. Like, so you're going to take your cut, your profit. You just got to make sure that there's still meat on the bone, but you're going to essentially sell that contract to an investor, and that investor is going to buy it off of you, as an example. So that's wholesaling. The BRRRR strategy is essentially a mix of flipping and buying and holding. That's what I do. There's rent to own. So for example, if you've got somebody that is interested in buying a house, but they don't qualify. So what they would do is they would rent to own it from you you would essentially have a 3-year contract or whatnot. I mean, some people do 3 years, some people do 5. They would buy the house from you at that time. And likely they'll be bringing in, 3 to 5% as a down payments. They're going to pay rent, plus there's an options payments on top of it. So your cash flow might be better, but you're leaving a lot of money on the table. In my opinion, that rent to own is not the best for everybody unless you're brokering it, which I don't want to get into too complex of discussions. But you're leaving a lot of the wealth on the table, which is the mortgage pay down and the appreciation that you're going to get in Southern Ontario for more cash flow. So you kind of have to weigh what you want. Otherwise, I mean, you can do land development, a little bit more experience. I wouldn't recommend as a brand new person to do that. But there's dozens and dozens of different things that can be done. But those are some of the more common ones.
So number 1.
All right, Pavan, do we need a real estate license for this strategy? I don't have a license. I am not a realtor. I'm proud that I'm not a realtor, because if I was a realtor, I'd be like working like even more. So I just want to delegate this stuff out. And, of course, like I look at deals, I analyze deals, but like, I always want, like, I want a good realtor on my team to like go out and see these properties before I'm going to go out and see them, because they're local, they're out there. It's just so much easier. Sometimes I buy stuff that I don't necessarily see because I trust them. I'm not saying that you guys should do that at all. But, over time, when you have enough properties and you're comfortable, you can, rely on them for a few things too. But definitely you don't need your license. You just need to have good realtors that are to the areas that you want to invest in that understand the strategy. Hopefully they're investors themselves. That also helps because you can like lean on them for their team. Do you only invest in Ontario or other states or other cities? Only in Ontario for now. I like the fundamentals. I like the immigration numbers of Ontario. I like the low vacancy of Ontario. I like the, 10-year appreciation numbers. I like all those things in Southern Ontario. So I'm going to stick to, being here because it works. That's not to say that other places can't work. Keep in mind, lots of people are making lots of money in, many different cities, provinces, overseas even, but, stick to one thing and just keep doing it over and over if it works well, before you change into something, too different, because you don't want to be doing 5 different deals that are completely different from each other. Try to own in a little bit on your skills and your efficiency by picking one strategy and going from there in one area to start with, or I would say maximum 2.
Sarah, how do you manage all these properties if one is in north, the other one in south?
Yeah. So, well, I have a few in Brantford, and Hamilton. I mean, that's kind of the same. I'll tell you, I self-manage. I found my own tenants, and I'm very picky with the tenants that I put into the units because they can make or break your whole experience afterwards. So I do a very, very thorough screening process. Like they go through like 5 different steps before they even get the keys. While most people will just, let them come and see the place. Like there's 2 steps even before they are allowed to come and see the place. And you can do that because tenants are a dime a dozen at this point in time. So it's important that we don't have a whole lot of control in Ontario being landlords. So it's just important that you take control over the screening piece. So that's helped. And then, just have a good handyman, good HVAC person, a good plumber, and, a couple other tradesmen. And most of the stuff that's going to happen, I mean, it's going to be like, I would say, my properties, because I self-manage them. It's usually going to be like something along the lines of like plumbing or an appliance that, needs to be repaired or replaced or something along those lines. And like literally you'll just text your tradesperson and they go and, they communicate with the tenant, because you've built a good team, you trust them. Again, in the beginning, you probably want to have a little bit more control, but, and then just send me an invoice and I just pay it electronically. So, I mean, if a tenant calls me, like I'll tell you, like 2 weeks ago, there was that big windstorm. And in Brantford, one of the big tree branches knocked over the hydro line and pulled out all of the I don't know, like 5 houses, and our hydro box actually fell off the house and damaged our siding. So the tenant called, but he had no power or whatnot. So, I mean, I called the electrician and he went and fixed it. I mean, it was a $3,000 cost, but you know, it is what it is. I look at that piece of property, I bought it for $220. It's worth probably $380 at this point today, 3 years later. Good tenant. You know, you factor in your cash flow to account for things like that. And like, could I go through insurance? Yeah, but you know, I'm not going to screw over my insurance for next year because you make a claim, the insurance goes up. So you got to kind of weigh the pros and cons. It was $3,000, and you know, I'll eat it. It's annoying, but I've made my money tenfold from that. But things like that will happen. You just have to look at it as a business and like not let it get, you know, too stressful for you, because ultimately at the end of the day, trust me, you'll sleep and you'll wake up 5 years from now and you're like, shit, this property did really well, even if you had to, you know, deal with a couple like headaches like that.
You know, Sarah, what is crazy? I just had a problem in one of my rental in a basement. So the pipe broke. And then I called the company and it was exactly 3,000 plus HST.
Yeah.
And then I called my insurance and say, if I claim, how much my insurance will go up? And I found out the 3,000 will go up like in 3 years. I say, you know what, just give me my 3,000.
Yeah.
I went through insurance because
Yeah.
it's not, it won't go up too much.
Yeah, and it also depends what deductible you have. Like we have $2,500 deductibles for every single one of our properties, so we're only going to claim for big losses. So I would have had to pay $2,500 just to like get like maybe another $600. I'm like, no way.
Okay. Yeah. So a few more questions.
Yeah, selling a contract and investor strategy sounds good. Can you describe the steps involved? I'm not a wholesaler, but essentially what you would do is you would market. So you can send mailers, you can do door knocking, start talking to seller, grab a blank purchase and sale agreement, put the contract together on that. And then you've got to, at the end of the day, also have investors that are ready to buy. So you want to, you know, in addition to starting to advertise for sellers that are motivated to sell for whatever reason, maybe they're going through a divorce or debt, or maybe they're hoarders, or usually like, you know, maybe the house needs a lot of work. So usually they're distressed houses. You have to understand the value of them. So you have to really know the area really well. And then you have to get them to agree to sell it to you at a discount. And then let's just say, for example, like just for simple math, a property on market would be worth 400 grand. Okay. You're able to talk to the seller because the place isn't like as nice. Maybe they're a little bit hoarders. You're able to get it for 350. So they agree to sell it to you for 350. You have whatever conditions you need on it. And obviously you got to do your own due diligence. Like I'm covering my ass. I'm just letting you know how it goes. But do your due diligence as well. Don't just take my advice for it. But let's just say you take that contract, you get the seller to agree to sell it to you for 350. You know that it's worth 400 as is if somebody was to buy it from the MLS. And then maybe you go and you shop it out to your investors for 385. So there's still some money left to, you know, for the investors coming in because they're not paying 400, they're paying 385. And then you've made essentially the difference between that 350 and 385. That's your fee. So making it sound really simple, but you definitely, you know, there's a lot to it, but essentially that's the concept. Isabel, how to find an investor who will want to buy your contract. So you do have to work on that piece, right? You need to build an investor list, or you need to be part of a community, maybe like the right club. If you get something under contract, you need to know where to go, where people will want to buy it from you. And networking is important. Like a group like this is important as well. You know, there's some stuff on Facebook, the right club on Facebook. If you ever have a deal, like, you know, people look at that too. There's wholesale Facebook groups that you could take a look at. Or you can start slowly working on your mailing list if people are interested with that. You start getting them to your email list. So when you have a deal, you send an email out and see who's interested. Pavan, who do you have in your team? I have a core team and I have a local team. My core team is like a mortgage broker, an accountant, a real estate investing lawyer, a paralegal. I run lots of things by. Realtors are more local. My accountant, my bookkeeper is still core. And there's probably a handful of other ones that can't think of off the top of my head right now. And then you've got your local team, depending on where you're going to go. So that's going to be your realtors, your contractors, your tradespeople, and all that stuff there. Oh, an insurance broker should be in your core team as well.
What's the difference between a lawyer and paralegal?
Yeah.
No.
Your lawyer is going to do your real estate contracts, your deals, your transactions. That's going to be your real estate lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Your paralegal is going to be dealing with the tenant. That's all the tenant stuff, right? So if you ever have to go to the landlord tenant board, or you have questions about the Residential Tenancies Act, or you have any tenant questions, you do want to have a paralegal on retainer. Like I think I paid mine, I don't know, $250 like a couple years ago. And like literally, like I can ask her whatever questions. I'll call her and like, okay, Wenda, this couple broke up, he left, like, what do you recommend that I do with the lease? Do I leave it as is? Do I do an amendment? Like, so like, just like even small things like that, it's just really good to have like another person to bounce off ideas, but they would be the ones that would like go to the court for you. Like if you ever had a tenant that didn't pay and like she issues my notices. So like if a tenant is going to leave, she essentially will like draft up the N11. I mean, different forms for different things, get the tenants to sign. She's local out there, so I don't even need to worry about any of that. Rent increases, like you can write those out. There's forms for everything, but that's essentially a paralegal will deal with all the landlord tenant stuff. And then a real estate lawyer is going to be more the transaction of the real estate, deals.
Oh, okay. And do you pay the paralegal every time you need his service or her service, or
it's just a question? No. Like if it's a form, like we have to do something, then I can't remember if maybe it's like 40 or $50 or something. Like it's worth me not driving out, for nothing necessarily. But the retainer piece just allows me to be able to ask questions and also be like, when I'm doing some of my screening, one of the many steps that I do for screening tenants is I actually will email my paralegal and I'm like, hey, so these are the applicants. Have you heard of any of them? Because she's in the courts all the time, right? So you just want to make sure that none of them are slipping through the cracks. She's got like a nice little black book of tenants that she sees over and over and over. So I don't need to see the black book, but I just want to make sure that the people I'm looking at are not in her book.
Oh, okay. So the paralegal has to be local.
I think so, because then like, how are you gonna do your check, your extra check? I like to have local ones, because then they can also go out there and do the paperwork if you need to, and then they can go to the courts if that ever comes down to that for you. So yeah, like I think it's just easier to have local paralegals. That's just my own opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Do I manage my own properties or give it to a property management company? I self-manage right now. It's just having the processes, procedures set up. Again, at some point, am I going to hire a property management company and just pass off the portfolio? Like, maybe, but like, it's just, like, I'll tell you, I maybe spend 2 hours a month managing. So I don't need to spend, 8% off all my gross rents paying somebody to manage my portfolio if I can do it in 2 hours a month. You know what I mean? So, down the road, if I'm gone for 6 months out of the year, probably at that point, I might just hand the whole thing off, and I'm sure I'll have a lot more at that point, that point in time. But right now, I can't justify it. Like, it's just easy, it's easy. The tenants are fine. But if I were to buy, I don't know, a 10-plex and assume a bunch of tenants, I'd probably just hire a property manager for that right from the start, because I don't want to deal with those types of tenants. But being very good at screening them and the types of properties and like my properties are nice, they're clean, they're usually well renovated. The tenant profile is going to be easy, and you're not going to get the same type of tenant profile that you might get in like somebody living in a worn down place that you're taking over. So don't hate me for saying that. It's just different tenants live in different situations, right? So, and the different problems, and you'll have different headaches. Like, I just don't want to have the complaints about the noise, and like, that's the annoying stuff. Like, just deal with a property manager at that point in time. But but with it set up properly, you doing the conversions, setting up your tenants from the start, it's easy to still self-manage. I assume you have all the investments in your company. I'm guessing that means that, do I have a corporation or are they in my personal name? I think that's what you're asking. Yes and yes, they're both. Some lenders actually give you better terms if you are putting them into your personal name, and I have some in corporations as well, depending on which lenders it was. And it's not a black and white, so it's not like the US where it makes sense to go all corp, right? It is going to be very dependent on your situation. So for our first 5 or 6, we didn't need to put in a corp, and then the rest we did. Talk to your mortgage broker for sure before you do that, as well as your accountant, because then you'll see what the benefits are. And I'll tell you, doing corporation taxes is a lot more expensive and annoying. And you're still personally guaranteeing the loan, even if it's in a corp. So it's not like the US where you can bankrupt the house and like walk away with the keys and leave the keys in the house and then you're not touched. No, they come after you personally. So it's not as like black and white, and it's not as beneficial. I'll tell you, there are some benefits, but they're not as like great as people think. Talk to us about your 7-step approach to real estate investing. I'm guessing that, are you talking about the BRRRR strategy? Or are you talking about the 5-step screening process?
You can unmute yourself and ask. And if you're not too comfortable in English, Sarah is bilingual. You can ask the question in French.
Yeah, if you guys are French. I'll tell you the terms. I know more in English, mais je parle français aussi, c'est pas un problème.
I can ask my question probably while they are responding to you, Sarah. My question, I have a lot of questions. My first is like, do you create contract by yourself when you are like, the contract between you and the tenants? So do you create it yourself?
So there is in Ontario a standard lease agreement that you actually have to use now. So if you just go if you just Google Ontario standard lease agreement, it'll come up, and there's actually a new one that was just put out like maybe a week or 2 ago. You got to use that new one. And then you can add an addendum. So I have a 20-page addendum in addition to the standard lease, because there's not a whole lot of, there's not enough stuff in the lease agreement. But I'll tell you, whatever you put in the agreements, even in the addendum, if it doesn't go with what the Residential Tenancies Act, the overarching tenant, landlord act says, it's void, right? So you can't be like, no pets allowed if the Residential Tenancies Act doesn't have that rule. So again, it'll even if you add like a bunch of stuff to the contract, whatever you put there that is not what the Residential Tenancies Act would say, it goes out the window.
Okay, if you don't feel comfortable of doing that, who is the right person you can ask? Like, is it a broker? Is it there's someone who you can approach and ask about it?
About the contract, you can ask a paralegal will any paralegal will likely have their own addendum that they've added to the lease agreement. So like sometimes they'll sell them.
Okay.
Usually so I can't share mine because I didn't, a paralegal created it and it's not my original content, but a paralegal will be able to sell, one that they've created that you can use.
Okay, that's perfect. So how can you find a paralegal?
Network.
Okay.
It depends on the area where you're going. Yeah, there's lots. You can go to therightclub.com and ask for a paralegal recommendation, but it depends on the area, right? So like my paralegal that, that's great. I might ask her some questions for somewhere perhaps in Peterborough, but like, I'm not going to actually utilize her to do anything paper wise, right? Because she's not physically there. It just doesn't make sense. So depending on where you're going, you might just need to find different paralegals, but I think Fanny probably has some good ideas for you.
Yeah,
okay.
she's in London. It's fine. Okay.
Okay, probably I will ask Fan about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
my
I'll tell you that Facebook recommendations is really good. If you go to the Right Club is one of the clubs I founded. There's a Facebook group, and just say, do you have any recommendations of paralegals in this area?
okay, so it's a right club.
Yeah, REITE club.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I'll put it down.
Sarah,
put it down.
can you talk about the right club for people who don't know it a little bit?
Yeah, so about 4 years ago, myself and 3 other investors founded a real estate investing and training club for Canadian investors to be able to get the information that they need and the connections that they need to their team. So it's basically a networking group, and we help each other. And there's, different experts in different topics that will speak. There's free webinars. There's a free podcast. That's the Right Club podcast. But it's a great, right now they're all virtual, obviously. But we have 2 monthly webinars. We've got lunch and learns. We've got lots of stuff. So if you could just go to therightclub.com, the calendar section will give you some information. We're just cleaning up the website a little bit, but there's also our Facebook group, The Right Club. If you just type in The Right Club in the Facebook group. And if you are looking for any recommendations, just say, hey, I'm looking for a paralegal in this area. What kind of recommendations do you guys have? And, people will help each other out, because it's a small industry. Believe it or not, there's not that many investors out there. So it's important that we're there for each other, right?
Okay, yeah. So you mentioned there's at the beginning, you mentioned that it's better to work with a broker than working with people from the bank. So I have been working with people from the bank, but those are just for home, not investments. But now moving forward to investment, do you recommend that? I am asking you these questions because I am in the process of getting my first house for investment. And I already started working with the bank. But when you mentioned that, I was like, oh, maybe I have to change my mind and look for a broker. So it clicked in my mind. So what do you recommend?
If you're going to be investing and your goal is to scale up and buy more than 1 or 2 investment properties, you're better off to go with a broker. Because the broker is going to work with you like throughout. Even in 5 years from now, that broker will still be the broker, right? The bank person, teller, will be gone. If they're good, someone else will be there. And they're incentivized and paid by the bank. So the mortgage broker is going to look out for your best interest. And, if they know that you're going to be better off to start with certain other banks or other lenders first, they're going to make sure that you can go to them first and then different banks afterwards, so that you can keep adding to your portfolio. Because what happens with a lot of investors, if they don't add the right lenders at the proper time, maybe you'll be stopped at 4 properties and you won't be able to get any more if you go to the wrong bank. So all of them have different criteria that they look for, right? Yeah. And they're going to pull your credit once. If you go to if you go to RBC, they're going to pull your credit. If you don't like what they have to say and you go to TD, they're going to do the same thing. So you don't want to ding your credit either by going and bank shopping yourself. And then the other thing is they're going to have access to private lenders. They're going to have access to credit unions, trust companies. Like, these are going to be important as you add more deals in your portfolio, to have somebody that has access to all of these things.
Okay. Yeah.
Grace, if you remember, Sarah say after a few properties, the bank asked her, instead of 20% down, they start asking her 25%.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, exactly. Because it was a bank.
Yeah. Some banks are better than others. But you know what? Don't worry about figuring out which one's better than others. Just hire somebody that works for you. So I'll tell you, there's a handful of mortgage brokers that I would recommend. Mm-hmm. One is Streetwise Mortgages, Dalia Barsoom. Mm-hmm. One is Claire Drage, the Windrose Group. Mm-hmm. One is Butler Mortgages. You can talk to Michael or Dan. One is Brian Hodgman, Mission 35. Those are all really good mortgage brokers for investors that are used to helping people scale.
Okay. Okay. Probably I will want those names.
Yeah. I mean, if you guys want them, just send me an email.
Okay.
If you want Sarah at sarahlarbi.com if you want a recommendation or a connection with a mortgage broker. happy to do that.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay, Grace, even me after two properties, the bank told the third one, so I had to have somebody to co-sign, somebody, yeah, because they told me after two properties I was done.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So, but
because I went to the bank.
Fanny, is it a secret or how many properties do you have?
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Close to Sarah?
No, no. But
Okay.
hopefully soon. Hopefully, I want to retire soon too.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sarah, I wanted to ask you about the water heater. Do you buy them or do you rent them?
I buy them. I hate Reliance with a passion. I think the first time I called Reliance, which was my first rental property, and I asked them to put the water heater rental in my tenant's name, they refused to because it's their policy. I'm like, all right, it's your policy. It's gonna be my policy to remove every single property I buy. Your water heater, you can come pick it up, and that's what I've done ever since. But I'll tell you what the problem is. A water heater, like it costs, I would say installed. I used to get them at even a bigger discount, but unfortunately my original contact can't get them at that price anymore. But I would say they're anywhere between, installed $1,300 to $1,800. And if you're planning on keeping the property for a while, and you're paying Reliance $30 a month, at some point you realize it just doesn't make sense because you're not going to get calls. You're not going to service that stuff every single year. Like I may have, out of all of them that I've bought, I might have had like 2 calls and, maybe it's $90 each per call to fix a couple parts. It's totally worth it. I just, the tenants aren't going to aren't going to be able to put that utility into their name and Reliance wants to play hardball, I will make sure I get rid of all my Reliance anything. So that's it. No Reliance, no rental. I don't like renting anything. I like people renting from me. I just don't like renting stuff myself.
Where do you buy them?
I have a contact. His name is Av, and he is the gas guy. And I just get them from him. He's been doing it like his number. I'll give you guys his number if you want to write it down. It's 519.
Okay, 519.
You know what? I'll put it in the chat. 732 5665. His name is Ab. Let me just make sure that that's his. Hang on, because he's got 2. 1 second. Sorry, guys. He's got 2 numbers. I want to make sure. Oh, okay. 732-6788. Okay, hang on. 732-6788. All right, so 519-732-6788. And his name is Av. So he can get water tanks, depending on the size, install them. And then you basically just call like Reliance. He'll unhook it and just like leave it in the backyard or like leave it like, in the, like next to the house, and then Reliance just comes and picks it up. Sometimes there's like a small charge to pay for them to pick it up. Sometimes they don't, they don't charge, but yeah, no, like he's been good. And I mean, you could always buy one at like Home Depot or something. And, I bought one for my cottage. It was like $500, and like those guys did it for another $300. Like that's super cheap too. So he's not necessarily always the cheapest, but just efficient and easy. And I just basically call him, send him to the property. He does his thing, sends me the bill.
Perfect. I think Pavan asked another question.
Pavan, what are the biggest challenges in managing property? I mean, I think the biggest time spent is going to be doing the renos or just like managing the renos. In terms of screening tenants, once you've done that well and you've got a good tenant, in terms of managing the property, I mean, I do twice a year inspections. We just make sure that we look at the fire and the carbon. I don't think there's challenges per se. I think just some tenants are like more annoying than others, some of them like, but again, I would say the ones that are no longer with us. But just, you know, if they need something and they need something fixed, like, you know, be good, like answer within the normal, you know, amount of time. Challenges per se, I mean, I would just say like, just keep tabs on like, you know, all of your stuff that you need to do. So if you need to, you know, send some more, we send like filters for the furnace. If you want to change them yourself, you can, or you can send them to the tenant if you trust them and just have them text you once they've changed them. Do, you know, semi-annual inspections. I think, you know, what the biggest thing is when they leave and that property was nicely renovated and the, you know, there's no holes in the wall. I'll tell you, every time somebody does leave, like some of them are going to be better than others, but there's always going to be a little bit of like fixing up that you got to do, right? Some is going to be way worse than others. Like my sister-in-law, but like sometimes, you know, sometimes there's still gonna be holes in the walls from like putting stuff up, right? There's still gonna be like little dents. So you still will have that to do. I think that's, you know, maybe part of the annoying management part. But like, I don't really get like calls that like a toilet at 3 a.m. call, like that's just like fake news, right? If a toilet is leaking, there's a friggin' water shut off. But like, so you know, sometimes you'll have pipes burst. You know, we've had a few of that. We've had tree roots grow into some of the piping, and we've had to spend, I think it was like $4 or $5 grand to fix the piping going into the house because everything was backing up. So like, I think some like that stuff, you know, is annoying here and there, but it's part of the business, right? It's not completely passive. And if you know, want to retire earlier, you do need to be a little bit more hands-on than just giving your money to someone else to do it, right? You know, you could be a passive lender, that's great, but if you got 100 grand and you're just loaning out your money at 9%, I'll tell you, you're better off to just buy a deal using that 100 grand. That's just my take, because you'll do better in the long run. What do you recommend for people who want to buy in group? I'm guessing you were talking about like a syndication or something, where there's like a big project and they're raising money in funds, essentially. I'm guessing that's what it means. Do your due diligence, right? Like, I'm not saying not to do it, but is it going to make you retire? I don't think so. I mean, you're going to have to have a lot of funds to start with to make that, you know, help you retire in the next 10 years. That's just my take. It's not a bad thing. It's just a slower process. It's much slower. And you should do your due diligence, because if you're giving your money and you're pooling your money, and somebody hasn't proven that they can do it before, I don't know if that's a risk I would want to take. So some of them are better than others. And then the other thing is, you know, 12%, let's just say you have 100 grand and they're giving you 12% interest on it. I mean, that sounds good, but I'll tell you, I do so much better than 12%, so much better. So you got to pick and choose, right? 12, like I wouldn't do something at 12%. If I was starting out, I would do my own deal, because I'll tell you, your mortgage pay down that your tenants are paying, that's 6% likely on your money, the principal amount. Appreciation, maybe that's 4%. You're already at 10%. Then you got your cash flow, right? And then sometimes if you buy right and you do the right renovations, like that could be boosted up even more. But if you just do a buy and hold, you're probably at 12% right there on your money.
Isabel, you can ask your question, because I think you saying your group was to buy one property together, right?
Mm. Okay.
Tu
Okay,
peux poser ta question.
Oui, tu peux parler en français si tu veux.
Isabelle, you can unmute.
Oui, allô?
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Non, mais c'est ça. Ma question, en fait, c'était du fait que, mettons, plusieurs personnes qui se mettent ensemble pour acheter une propriété pour un but de faire louer, locatif. Et puis, je me demandais, qu'est-ce que tu en penses à l'idée du fait de se mettre ensemble et puis mettre l'argent ensemble et puis, bon, peut-être faire la gestion ensemble, puis quasiment comme une compagnie, quoi.
Ok, je vais répondre en anglais si c'est correct avec toi.
It's fine, go
Okay,
ahead.
cool. So I'm just gonna translate the question. So if there's, I don't know if everybody speaks French.
Dina doesn't speak French.
Okay, cool. So Isabel was just asking about if there is like a group of like 4 or 5 people that want to pool their money together and essentially buy a deal together. Is that a good idea if they just started creating a company or not? So here's my personal opinion on this is you may not be friends in 5 years from now.
Yeah.
One of you guys might have a divorce. One of you guys might annoy each other. And so I can just imagine a bunch of problems. That's just me personally. Everybody has good intentions going in. If you're going to do it, maybe just do it with one other person. Start like one other person. I wouldn't mix 4 or 5 unless you guys have a lot of experience. So or doing bigger deals, and you're going to have each bringing something different to the table. If you're just going to do a small deal, and these are friends that are not like necessarily like investors, and you guys are pulling your last 50 grand, like that's just a disaster waiting to happen. Okay. On the other hand, you know, I'm looking at land development with the Empresses, right? So there's 4 of us, but we all have, you know, large portfolios. We all have, you know, business mindset, and you know, and it's different versus our first one. So you just have to look at who you're investing in, and you have to say, are we all going to be friends in 5 years? What if one person gets divorced? It can get messy, especially as if you're just doing it because you don't have enough and they don't have enough. You know, find a you know, you can do it, but you got to have a really ironclad contract, and you want to hang on to that stuff for at least 5 years. What happens if that property goes bad? What happens if one person wants to be paid out because they need to get out because all of a sudden so just ask a lot of those questions. I think you're better off doing some of your own, and then bringing in one person that maybe has what you don't have, or down the road, like if you're going to go do something bigger and you all have lots of experience, and you know, your livelihood doesn't necessarily rely on any one deal, then you can probably partner with 4 to 5 people at that point. But I don't know if I would do it. I don't know if I would do it right from the start. There's a lot of emotion in real estate investing. People are going to want to over renovate. People are going to be like, no, I want to pick the tile color. Like if I mean, and you know, the 4 or 5 people, if you are all going to be, you know, or some of you guys are going to be doing some of that, there's always going to, you really got to define the goals. One person or 2 is probably going to do a lot more than the other. So like, how is that other, you know, how, to me, there could be lots of downsides. However, I'm not saying don't do it. I just don't think it's right necessarily for the first one to have 4 or 5 people. It's probably better off for you to find one person. And just the odds are going to be better that you'll likely still have that thing in 5 years.
Merci. J'ai compris ce que tu veux dire.
It's a good point. As Sarah told you, her first property, she went to a family and it didn't go good.
Yeah.
So family and friends, if you want to stay together, don't go in business together.
Yeah, unless you guys bring a lot of experience and it's business and the emotions out of it, right? So like, which is hard to do when you're first starting. There's a lot of emotion in real estate when you first start.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
okay, I have another question, Sarah. When you are making your first contract, again back to the contract, probably I can imagine there are things you are based on when you are calculating the monthly, like how payment, like how much you want to charge. There are things that you have to be like, okay, like Like there are things like you consider before deciding how much you're gonna charge. About probably if you have a 2-bedroom apartment you're going to rent to people, there are things you're gonna like your charge is gonna be based on something. What are those things that you have to consider before determining how much you're gonna charge?
Yeah, so the best easy way to do is you ask a realtor, you check Kijiji. If you've got a 2-bedroom house or a 2-bedroom unit, see what is being marketed in that area for the current time, because you want to be at market rents, right? So market rent for Brantford will be different than market rents for Hamilton for a 2-bedroom unit. So it's just important to be have a good pulse on the market. And I always try to list it higher. I can always come down lower. If you get a lot of requests and a lot of answers, you probably underlisted. You know, you don't want too many responses. But the best way to do it is look at what is happening on Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace or any of those things for your area and similar comparable properties. You know, and if you're finding that the average is 1,600, the lowest is 14, and that's looks like a dump. The highest is 17. You know, maybe start at 17 and just see what happens. The other thing with Kijiji, I personally like is you often tell how many views that person has had and how long it's been on the market. And then you can also look at like the wanted ads, what people are looking for. So, you know, work with it. This it goes back to also having a good team. If you have a good local realtor, different realtor for different areas, they'll have a good pulse on the current market rents.
Okay. Yeah, perfect.
The vision of a question from Pavan.
Okay, Pavan, if we are to go for but fix and rents, where do you think as a new investor I can look for resources? If we are to go for buy, fix, rent strategy, where do you think a new investor can look for resources? Are you looking for areas or are you looking for a team? You can just answer that and I can give you some insight.
For the team, because I'm kind of a newbie into real estate investing. So I'm kind of looking at either multiplex or but I like a strategy of buy fix. I don't have any experience, just to explore if this is the right thing for me. Where
Yeah.
can I find some resources? I just subscribe to your channel. Hopefully I'll go there, but still, is there any way I can start?
Yeah. So are you looking to get what information on the strategy or information on a market?
I am from Montreal, so I don't know how I can invest in Ontario. I would love to.
Montreal, you could do the strategy with. Montreal, reach out to Jared Henderson.
Can I write down? Can you spell his name?
Send me an email. I'll connect you guys. He's big out in Montreal also, but actually it's tonight. The Right Club has Montreal and Ottawa events.
Okay.
Okay. So go to the Right Club Facebook page. There's a guy named Francois there.
Okay.
Francois Lantier.
Okay.
Ask him. There's one tonight. We missed it, but they're doing Montreal and Ottawa events. I would suggest that you go there because you can really build your team there. They've got experts that come on and talk about different things and different team members that you're going to want to have. That's probably the best resource for you for now, and it's free. You might as well do it. So it's either therightclub.com or on Facebook, the Right Club, and then Francois is one of our he works with the Right Club. So just ask him when the next one is and to give you that information.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. Drek, no money down investing. Did you pass through this route? I used 20% down, but I bought something really cheap, which I didn't know that there was other ways back then. So that's what I thought like we had to do because that's what the bank told us and we weren't helped by anybody creative. I'll tell you, no money down investing is easier, I think, in the US. Realistically, in Canada, you can't unless you bring in a joint venture partner, right? So like, let's just say like how you would do no money down investing in Canada is you're either going to do it as a wholesale deal and you're going to just assign the contract like we talked about in the beginning, or you need to find a really amazing deal off market, not on the MLS, and you need to bring in a joint venture partner that's going to bring you the money and the financing and convince them to do that with you. To just go buy a piece of property yourself, realistically, with no money down, it's not going to happen. You can probably get away with 5% if you are going to quote unquote go live in it, you know, and go from there. But you know, no money down, investing.
Or you can use OPM, over people money,
Yeah.
a card money lender.
But hard money lenders will loan on 75 or 80% loan to value at this point, right? So they're never really, most of them anyways, are not going to give you 100% loan to value. Unless, so, you know, you could do it if you have a friend that wants to loan you the 20% down as a full amount, and you pay them 5% or 9% on their money. So like you could do that, but you've got to convince other people to give you the money, right?
I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the present economic situation, with all the corona thing happening, COVID thing happening, what do you think? Is this the right time to invest? Wait for market to, as experts say, there'll be a market crash, and you know, do you think is this should we wait for the market crash, or should we kind of we are open for investing now?
I mean, I'll tell you what I'm doing, and then you can pick your advice, because I can't tell you exactly what to do. But here's me personally, what I'm doing. I don't care if there's a market crash or not. If there's a market crash, I'll tell you. You know, I'll tell you in Southern Ontario, in Montreal, in Canada, the market crash is not going to be losing 70% of the value. It's not going to be that. You might lose 20%, which is essentially what the growth was from March until today. Okay, so let's just say we lose, the crash is 20%. So now we're back into January, February numbers, which is not that bad. So here's what I'm doing. If a deal makes sense, I don't care if it's today, I don't care if it's 6 months from now, if it makes sense. Making sense means I can do my strategy successfully and I can cash flow, so that if that property dips in value, I don't care. To be honest, I hope there is a market crash, but I don't think there's going to be a big market crash. If there's anything, it's going to be a softening. That's just my own personal opinion, right? No one has a crystal ball. I'm definitely not an economic person. But, you know, if it goes down and goes down 20%, I just want people to stop bidding on everything I'm trying to buy. So like everything I'm trying to buy has 14 offers, 10 offers. That is just nuts right now. So I'd be happy if like things slow down so I can buy stuff. But I'm not going to necessarily wait for that 50% crash or 70% crash. Like I can't see that happening. You know, we have a good solid financial banking system versus many countries. You know, with the 5 big banks versus the US, where there's lots of small independent banks that do their own thing. Like we're very controlled here. And then we still have the immigration number. I mean, the 400,000 immigrants that are going to be coming, they haven't had that many immigrants in Canada for like years. And they're going to have another 400 the year after, and another 400 and change the year after. What do you think that's going to do to the demand for rent, the demand to even buy? But here, I'll tell you the other thing too, is if there's a market crash, tenants aren't going anywhere. They still need to rent somewhere. People still need to live somewhere. So your rents aren't going to crash with the market prices. If anything, that's going to push rents up, because less people are going to be, well, first of all, I think if there's any downside, people are going to get scared and they just won't buy, so they'll need to rent. I'll tell you, market crashes aren't a thing to be worried about. I think if you buy the right property and it cash flows, that's great. But as an investor, they are actually pretty good, because that means more people will rent from you. More people will need a place to live. It'll really push up the value of the rents. That's my personal opinion. You know, if tomorrow we locked our doors to all immigration and we started building and building and building for 10 years, you know, nonstop, like, you know, the absorption, the amount of new builds versus how many people are you know, buying and renting, like we're nowhere close to having a high vacancy on that.
Okay. One last question from my side, that what would you suggest for if I'm an first time investor to look in Montreal or in Ontario? That's not confusion, but
I think you can look at both. Montreal's good too. It has different fundamentals, but Montreal's a good market. You know, Cobourg is a good market. You know, like there's lots of stuff even in between, close to Montreal. That's a good market. But you know, if the numbers work, it depends on the strategy that you want to do, right? If you're doing a buy and hold, some areas in Montreal will work better than others versus Ontario better than others, right? If you're doing the burst strategy, some areas will work better than others. So I think it's just important that like you figure out what the strategy is that you want to do. If you want to just get your feet wet and just do some buy and hold, then you're really going to have to look for something that can cash flow, right? Make sure that your rent covers everything that you've got to cover. If you're going to do renos, well, you've got to make sure that you're buying something in an area where you can do the reno, that you're actually going to get lift for it, right? And when you get the lift for it, you want to make sure that you can rent and your rent still covers your costs. Because if you're buying in a really expensive area trying to do the burst strategy, and all of a sudden you're refinancing and your rents aren't high enough, then that's also a mistake too.
Agreed.
Dina, people are always going to need shelter. Absolutely. So anytime is a good time to buy real estate. Yep. As long as the deal makes sense, it's a good time. Thanks for enjoying my podcast. If you guys haven't rated and reviewed, that would be awesome. If you can rate and review my podcast. I love that.
Can you tell them the name of your podcast?
It's called Where Should I Invest?
Perfect. And Sarah, what does financial freedom mean to you?
Being able to do what I want, when I want, where I want, with who I want, you know, and just, you know, being in control of my schedule and how I spend my time.
So Sarah, I'm gonna ask a question about it. You can answer or no. If it's private, it's okay. But I was going to ask, like, estimate like how like your income monthly. If you estimate, you don't have to say like exact amount, but you can estimate and say like it's between this and this.
I'll tell you that my income is enough to. So when I look at my old income and I look at my after-tax income versus the current income that I'm bringing in, it's pretty much in line with the net income.
Okay.
Of what I was bringing in before, but I'm taxed in a different bracket too, right? So it made sense. You got to look at your expenses. You know, everyone's going to have different expenses. I'll tell you, I don't have kids, right? So if you have kids, it might be a little bit different than, you know,
yes.
Yeah. You got to kind of weigh all of that stuff out, right? So like one person's income that they need is maybe not the same as somebody else's.
Yeah. Okay. So another question is like, when you're starting like to invest in real estate, have you ever been like regretting, like, or like probably felt like, have you ever felt overwhelmed and feeling like, oh, I wish I didn't start this? And have you ever felt that way?
I mean, I'll tell you, there are some renos where I had a great contractor that did a great job on the property, and then he did a second property and then got into drugs, and I had to fire him because he was so slow, and like literally the stuff that he was putting together was like super crooked. That was really annoying.
Okay.
You know, but again, you know, some of those properties we do really well on. In the grand scheme of things. But yeah, like that, his drug problem delayed my reno by about a month and a half because I had to get rid of him and find a new person to take over and fix some of the initial mistakes. But yeah, like there's things that will happen, and you've got to be able to like not be so stressed and worked up about like the small things. Cause like, yeah, that was really horrible at that time and it really pissed me off. But in the grand scheme of things, I mean, like we did so well on that deal now. It was just annoying back then.
Okay. That's good to know.
It's like a roller coaster, but you've got to tame the ups and the downs. I mean, you got to enjoy the process, but I'll tell you that there's going to be problems. There's going to be things that will happen. Like it's just like any business. And, you know, are you going to remember the worries, you know, a month later or two? Probably not. Right. Just like your job, there's pros and cons in your jobs and there's good and bad days. You know, you go back and you remember, oh, this Tuesday I had a really bad day. The Wednesday before it, like you probably won't. It'll just kind of blend in together, and then the good will outweigh all the shitty days.
Yeah, but I think in the real estate, it worries you the most when you feel like, okay, you have to pay the bank probably for like a mortgage, And if you don't have a tenant, sometimes you can feel like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do?
I'll tell you right now, your tenant finding problem is not a problem. You'll find tenants that are dime a dozen. You just got to make sure that you find the right tenants, because you look at where you're going to invest, likely in Southern Ontario, Montreal. Like if vacancies are 2% or less, except for Toronto condos, but if vacancies are 2% or less, you will find a tenant. If you're buying in some of the US market where it's like 9%, yeah, you might not find a tenant. But I'll tell you, I would any day would prefer to leave my unit vacant than to put in a tenant that I'm like, they could go well, or they could go, it could go bad. I will leave it vacant until I find that right one, because as soon as you have the wrong one in there, they can make your life so miserable. If they decide to stop paying, you could be a year without rent and having them in there. So I would rather wait and let it sit there for a month or two extra if I don't have the right one.
Okay, but you have to have money to pay the bank.
But keep in mind, so when you get a property, if you're just doing a buy and hold, you're paying the bank in arrears. So what that means is, let's just say you close on the first, your first, if you do a monthly mortgage payment, your first mortgage payment might just come 30 days after you close anyways.
Yes, yeah.
Right. So like you probably, and if you're just doing a buy and hold, once you get the property and you removed your conditions, ask for 4 showings in your contract. I always use those to show tenants. If I'm not going to do any much renovations, I'm going to use the showings before I close on a property to show tenants and get your tenant lined up. So you don't have to wait until the house is yours, literally with key in hand, to start that screening process, unless you're renovating, which different story, right?
Okay.
So just work with a mortgage broker, or not a mortgage broker, but a realtor that can help you do that.
Une question. À quel moment il serait nécessaire de commencer d'aller voir un courtier pour faire un achat? Est-ce que tu as fait tous tes achats de propriété avec un courtier, ou tu en as fait un avec la banque et 2 avec la banque, puis les restes avec un courtier?
Courtier mortgage broker ou ça c'est
broker?
Okay. All right. So the question is did I do all of my purchases with a mortgage broker or the bank? I only did the first 3 with the bank. Well, 2.5. I was looking at the third one. And then I moved it over. But I'll tell you, I had to untangle that mess originally, and it cost me money that I probably wouldn't have to pay otherwise. So just start with a mortgage broker from the start. You're going to be better off. If I had to do that again, I would have done it differently. I would have gone to the mortgage broker first. And also I actually would have put myself separately on the mortgages and my boyfriend separately on some other mortgages, so that we could have like each had separate ones rather than affecting both of our credit at the same time. So there's tricks and strategies that based on your situation, because if you guys both have T4 incomes, it may not always make sense to put both of you on everything. So we could have done better had we even not gone to the bank first, but it was already too late. But both of our names were on the first 2, so we had to continue that way. But it doesn't always mean that that's the best answer. So this is why a mortgage broker will help you, because we would have been able to do even more with some of the better rates and better terms and better lenders before having to go to like ones that are a little bit more difficult to work with.
Oh, merci.
Yeah. I haven't been using any broker. Like, do you pay a broker, or who pays the broker?
The banks. The banks will pay the brokers the majority of the time, unless there's another like company, a trust company or a credit union that doesn't pay them, then they'll just let you know. But it usually will come in the proceeds and the down payment. But the majority of the time, they're going to try to put you with somebody that like is not going to cost you money, because they will work with the bank and the bank pays them.
Okay, perfect.
And it doesn't cost anything to even have a conversation with them and just to see what you can qualify for. So, I mean, really, ultimately, I would suggest that you guys do it, because what you have to really.
Yeah. Wow, this is amazing. It has been helpful.
Good. I'm glad.
It was a perfect timing for me.
So Sarah, since now you're retired, how did your routine change? Or it didn't change?
I am focusing on fitness and yoga and working out. Like that's kind of like my new passion. I still have the Right Club and I still enjoy doing my podcasts. So I do those on Mondays. And then I'm still looking for deals, but like the cool thing is I get to spend time with my boyfriend and my family now versus before I was just always like, go, 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 So I actually have time to relax. I have time to read. I have time to, like I'm doing a girls' brunch tomorrow morning after my yoga class. And then I have an RMT, a masseuse coming here. Actually, the best thing ever is like, you don't have to go anywhere. You just get the RMT. They come with a table. So I'm getting like a 90-minute massage tomorrow. So like, of course, there's still, I'll tell you, I'm retired from the 9 to 5, but I don't want to just do nothing. I'm 36. Like, I still want to have goals. I still want to like move on to the next level and like do new things. And so, I don't want to just stop. So like, I still want the Right Club to do well. I still want the podcast to keep going. I still, enjoy doing these things, webinars, all that stuff. Like, to me, that's fun. It's not work, but, I wouldn't just sit there and watch TV for 10 hours a day because that just would drive me crazy and that would be really annoying. So, it's just different passions and different goals.
What is 9 to 5, by the way?
Is it the job?
The job world.
Oh, I was like, what is 9 to 5? Okay.
All right. So does anybody else have any questions? Otherwise, Sarah, thank you so much for your time and for your insight. And everybody, I hope you're going to follow Sarah on her podcast and the Right Club podcast. I listen to your podcast every day when I'm driving.
Good. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Do we have the link? Do we have information?
Yes. Her podcast is Where Should I Invest?
Okay.
If you go on your phone and download the podcast, and then you look for Where Should I Invest, Sarah Larbi, you will find it. And then
or if you just put Sarah Larbi, like it should actually come up.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah.
If you have any question, you can ask me. So Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And everybody, thank you. If you have any question, everybody, you can ask me. I think you have my contact. And if you want to reach out to Sarah, it's sarah@sarahlarbi.com.
Yeah. Thank you very much for both of you, Sarah and Fanny, for this wonderful evening. I learned a lot. I feel like now I am ready.
That's good. That's good. That's good.
Yes, awesome. I really, really appreciate this.
My pleasure. Happy to help. And if you guys need anything, you know where to find us.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.